It is the middle of summer, it is 40 degrees in the shade, and you have no air conditioning, no fan, no fridge full of cold drinks, no cold shower waiting for you. Welcome to almost all of human history. For thousands of years, people lived through brutal, blistering heat with none of the technology we now completely take for granted. So how on earth did they actually survive it? The answer is that they were far, far cleverer than you would ever expect. And some of their tricks were so good that we are bringing them back today. It all started with the buildings themselves. In the hottest parts of the world, people built with thick, heavy walls of mud brick, adobe, or stone. These massive walls worked almost like a battery for temperature. All day long, they slowly soaked up the brutal heat of the sun without ever letting it pass through to the inside, keeping the rooms beneath them cool and shaded. Then at night, they slowly released that stored warmth as the desert turned cold. They also kept their windows small and faced them away from the harsh sun. The house itself was the very first line of defense. But the true genius came from ancient Persia, in the form of the windcatcher. Picture a tall tower rising up from the roof of a house, open at the very top. As the wind blew across the top of that tower, it was funneled straight down inside and pushed cool air all the way through the rooms below. And when there was no wind at all, it simply worked in reverse, with hot air rising up and out of the tower, which sucked cooler air in from the shaded parts of the house. It was quite literally air conditioning with no electricity whatsoever, invented thousands of years ago. And the Persians took the idea even further. They ran the incoming air over underground water channels called qanats, or guided it past a fountain or a pool inside the house. As the dry, hot air passed over that water, the water evaporated and stole the heat right out of the air, leaving it noticeably cooler and a little more humid. This is exactly how a modern evaporative cooler works today. They had figured out the entire science of it by hand, with nothing more than towers, water, and some seriously clever design. Now here's the fact that sounds completely impossible. The ancient Persians made ice. In the middle of a scorching hot desert, they built giant dome-shaped structures called yakhchals. Using those same windcatchers, incredibly thick insulating walls, and channels of water, plus the cold, clear desert sky at night that pulls heat away by radiation. They could actually freeze water into ice, store it through the entire blazing summer, and enjoy a cold drink in 40-degree heat. Ice in the desert with no electricity at all. It is honestly one of the most brilliant inventions of the entire ancient world. Not everyone could build a giant ice house, of course, so for the very rich there was another option. They had ice and snow physically carried down from the mountains. In the Roman Empire, in ancient Persia, and in China, teams of workers would haul snow from distant peaks, pack it deep in straw to slow down the melting, and store it in special deep pits. Wealthy Romans then used it to chill their wine, and even to make some of the earliest versions of sorbet and ice cream. Cold treats existed 2,000 years before anyone had a freezer. Back home, the very design of the house kept fighting the heat. All across the hot world, from Spain all the way to the Middle East, homes were built around a central open courtyard, and in the middle of it sat a fountain or a small pool. The water cooled the surrounding air through evaporation, plants and trees provided deep shade, and the open courtyard let the hottest air escape upward while drawing cooler air through all the rooms. It was a private, peaceful, naturally cool little oasis right in the center of the home, and when all else failed, people simply went down. Underground, the temperature stays remarkably stable and cool all year round, no matter how blisteringly hot it gets up at the surface. So people dug cellars to keep both their food and themselves cool, and in some places they carved entire homes directly into the rock in the earth. Whole underground towns once existed, where people could escape the very worst of the midday sun. Just a few feet of solid earth turns out to be a shockingly good shield against the heat. What they wore mattered every bit as much. And here is a great myth to bust. In the very hottest deserts, people did not strip down to almost nothing. They covered up. They wore long, loose, flowing robes, very often in light colors. This sounds completely backwards, but it is actually brilliant. The loose fabric shades the skin entirely from the burning sun. It traps a layer of cooler air against the body, and it still lets sweat evaporate to cool you down. A head covering or a turban protected the head and neck. Covering up was the smart move, not the hot one. They were also very clever about when they did things. Why even try to fight the sun at its absolute worst? So all across the hot countries, people adopted the siesta. They worked in the cool of the early morning, rested or slept right through the blazing heat of midday, and then came back to life again in the evening. And at night, when the houses were still holding the day's warmth, millions of people would simply climb up and sleep on their flat rooftops or out in the open courtyard, beneath the stars where the air was always coolest. Then there was the art of moving the air by hand. People everywhere used handheld fans, but in places like India, wealthy households had something called a punkah. This was a huge cloth fan hung from the ceiling, which a servant would pull back and forth with a rope for hours on end, gently fanning the entire room. They also hung woven screens made from fragrant vetiver roots across their windows and doorways and kept them damp. As the dry breeze passed through the wet screen, it cooled the air right down and filled the whole room with a fresh, earthy scent. And then there were the simple, everyday tricks that absolutely everyone used. They stayed close to water, to rivers, wells, and shaded fountains. They planted trees and climbing vines to throw cool shade over their homes and their narrow streets. They drank constantly and made cool, refreshing drinks from fruit, from yogurt, and from herbs. Their markets and streets were very often covered or shaded over with stretched cloth. Life in a hot climate was carefully arranged, hour by hour, around staying out of the sun and staying close to anything that could possibly cool you down. And here's the most surprising part of it all. These methods genuinely worked, often keeping homes a full 20 degrees or more cooler than the air outside, while using zero electricity and producing zero pollution. In fact, as our modern air conditioners guzzle huge amounts of power and pump even more heat out into our cities, architects and engineers today are looking back and reviving these ancient ideas. Brand new buildings are once again being designed with windcatchers, thick walls, and shaded courtyards. The old wisdom is quietly becoming the new technology. So how did people survive the heat before air conditioning? Not by simply suffering through it, but by cleverly outsmarting it. With tall towers that caught the wind, thick walls that held back the sun, ice somehow made in the desert, cool rooms dug underground, loose flowing robes, and an entire daily rhythm built around the sun itself. They had no electricity at all, but they had thousands of years of hard-won wisdom about how to stay cool. So the next time your air conditioning breaks down on a brutally hot day, maybe don't panic. Just try to think like an ancient Persian, like this video if it kept you cool, and stay curious.